Hello and welcome to the editorial analysis of the Hindu. Today we shall be discussing the editorial of the 2nd of July. So coming to the first article, Lessons from Bhutan. This is a very important article. It has several points which we can use in our answers. So first and foremost, you should know that this is an important article. So try and focus, try and make some notes if you want to. So the context of this article is that recently Bhutan has proposed a policy. It is not a policy as of now. This is only a proposal that the salaries of teachers as well as doctors' salary is what should be increased in Bhutan. So this is what the proposal that was given by a body in Bhutan, which you should know about. This is the Gross National Happiness Commission. So this body is in itself, the name is also, as it's obvious, is the Gross National Happiness. This body is popularly is the highest policy making body in Bhutan, and the idea of this being a Gross National Happiness Commission is what is also a globally famous concept. So that is one thing that you should know first and foremost. Now coming to the issues which have been discussed, the first issue is with regards to the place of pride. Now basically what has been discussed here is that this profession of teachers as well as that of doctors is what has been given a place of pride, and this place of pride should not only be a symbolic place of pride. For instance, even in India, teachers have been, since our tradition is that teachers are looked up with pride, they are given a lot of respect. But what the editorial is highlighting, that this should not be a mere symbolism. What is important is that this place of pride also be given in remuneration. In remuneration, teachers do not have the place of pride, and that is what has firstly been highlighted here. The second issue that is very important, this is the key phrase. If I were in your place, if I were to use in this particular phrase in my mains papers, I would have definitely used it somewhere. That the problem here is that teachers are not, teaching for that matter is not a profession of choice. What is important is that this should be made into a profession of choice, is what is being called out in this particular article. Today what is happening is that people who are not getting jobs anywhere else are going into the field of teaching, and this is one very sad statement for our country. Especially teaching at the primary level is what is the most impacted, worst affected, and this is one of the least paid. So what is important that in the primary education at least teachers should be paid highly so that it becomes a profession of choice. So that is what has been talked about. Next, the editorial is talking about a correlation. Now basically the editorial is saying that what is important here is that a correlation should be established, that if teachers are paid highly and the best talent is what is coming into teaching, then will this be correlated to the education outcomes is what is being questioned. It might happen that the education outcomes might not increase even if the best talent is what is coming. So that could be primarily because there might be some other flaw in the teaching system. So this is one issue that is being questioned in the editorial, but later the editorial is answering it. It is saying that the OECD, that is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Developing, they had carried out such a study by the PISA, which is the Program for International Student Assessment. So this study, that was the PISA study by the OECD, which you should know the name of the study. Now basically as per this study, it was well proven that whenever the best of talent is coming to teach in the education system, then it does have a correlation with education outcomes, and education outcomes in that country will tend to increase. That is what has been talked about. Now next, the editorial is giving us another key phrase where it is saying that policies are levers of development. So this kind of a policy by the government will act as a lever to achieve the desired result of development of the human capital. So that is what has been talked about. Now next, the editorial is discussing a very important aspect, which is the fiscal implication. Now basically if salaries have to be increased, especially in the context of teachers, then this will require more and more budgets. Where will the space be created for more money is what is being talked about. Now for Bhutan, you should know that the expenditure is approximately 7.5% of GDP is what is spent on teaching. Compared to this, India is spending only 3% of its GDP, which comprises of approximately 10% of the budgets of the center as well as of the state governments. Now of this budget on education, a large part is already going in teacher salaries. So the issue is that how is it that the government will create money for development of the education system and simultaneously increasing the money or the salaries of teachers also. So in that context, a solution is what is being offered. Here the editorial is saying that instead what the government should go about is that the government should focus on rationalizing teacher recruitment as well as allocating funds to the existing programs. At present, the recruitment is what is very high. The government could cut down on this recruitment, recruit teachers, few teachers, but very good quality teachers is what is being advocated here. And also budgeting on the high number of programs that are there in the education sector, limiting these programs, making them more efficient is one solution which has been offered, and you can also talk about this solution. Another issue that is there and that is clustered to India is the problem of teacher absenteeism. Now basically the editorial is saying that this could primarily be because the teachers are not being well paid. They might seek some alternate jobs. For example, even farming, if a teacher might seek to only adhere to farming also simultaneously because the job teaching is itself not paying him well enough. So that will be one cause for teacher absenteeism. Also because some teachers might also be involved in parenting as well as nursing care. This is primarily because of the absence of the support system, the care system that should be provided to teachers. Crutches should be provided in schools, but that is clearly not there in the case of India. So in that context also there is a high degree of teacher absenteeism. Also another issue is the lack of motivation in teachers, which is resulting in teacher absenteeism. So what is important? That motivation be increased, and money is a potent factor for increasing absenteeism. If there's some students are from public administration, I'm sure you must be studying this, that how can motivation be increased? So that is, money can be one factor for increasing motivation. So in that context also teacher absenteeism is what is important. Another thing that the editorial is talking about is accountability. This is important. Now if the salaries are what are going to be increased, then obviously the government should focus on increasing accountability also. So that is one aspect that is discussed. Now in the case of India, what has been discussed here is the case of Delhi. The editorial here is saying that instead of, if the government cannot at present afford the scheme for the entire country, as a case study, this scheme is what should be piloted in Delhi, because Delhi is a small state, it is a small region, it is largely urban, and already the state in Delhi is investing a lot on education. So there is scope that in Delhi, as a case study for the entire country, the salaries of teachers is what should be increased drastically, so that the best of the youth can be attracted towards teaching, and then the education outcomes is what can be studied for the country. So that is what has been talked about. Lastly, the editorial is offering us a bigger picture, which is again important. Now this bigger picture is that even if this cost is what is going to be high, still in that context the editorial is saying that no investment that can enable educated, healthy, responsible and a happy community is going to be higher if it is going to lead to such kind of a society. So this is going to be largely an investment and not a negative cost. So that is what has been talked about, that even if the fiscal budgeting is what has to be done, the fiscal space needs to be pushed, it should be done in the interest, in the bigger interest of the nation and of that of the society. So that is what has been talked about. Indeed, this is an important article, very, very relevant. Education system is going to be very important. In yesterday's newspaper itself, I have discussed that education is one topic that even on this, and essay is what can be expected. For long this essay is due. So this is what you should focus on. And even if not an essay, in social issues in general studies paper 1, you will have ample scope to discuss about this. So in that context, try and bring about this analysis between the relation, this relationship, this correlation between the teacher salaries, the teacher motivation, the quality of teachers and the educational outcomes. This is going to be an important one. So that is the relevance. Coming to the next article, miles to go. Now the context of this article is with regards to some self-care interventions. Now before we discuss this, you have to understand that what is self-care intervention. Now basically what happens is that suppose a person falls ill. In that case, a person might go for some self-medication, but this self-medication might be at some traditional knowledge and not a particular medicine from the clinic, or for that matter from a particular chemist shop. What happens is that for buying medicines for being ill, a person has to first go to a doctor, then the doctor is going to give a prescription, and then from a chemist shop one buys medications. If this process of going to the doctor is what is bypassed, and a person can directly take medicines from the chemist on his own, and this is what is legally accepted also, then that kind of a treatment is what is known as self-care intervention. Now basically this is what has been discussed in the context of sexual as well as reproductive health. So we shall be discussing that in examples. First and foremost, you should know what the WHO talks about self-care. Now basically the WHO recognizes it and says that it is a good means to expand the healthcare services. As of now, what happens is, just because a person avoids going to the doctor, sometimes the cost benefit analysis is what is done. The cost of going to a doctor is high, and because of that a number of people are foregoing health benefits, and the WHO stands that if this can be avoided, it should be, and wherever it is possible, self-care interventions are what should be allowed. And in India there is a long way to go in this context is what has been discussed. Now some examples are what we will discuss, through which it will become very, very clearer to you. Now basically, for example, in the editorial is giving us some examples of these kind of self-care interventions. These are primarily in the context of some morning after pills. These are preventive pills that women can take after unprotected sex. So these are a self-care intervention. For this, a woman simply has to go to a chemist shop. No prescription from a doctor is what is required in this particular context. And in that case, this is what is important. It maintains the privacy of a woman is what has been discussed. So these kind of self-care medication is what is good. For example, some abortion pills are what have been talked about. These are mifepristone as well as misoprostol. These names are what are not important, but what you should know is that if a woman wants to get an abortion done, then in that case a woman will have to go and seek the prescription from a doctor, despite the fact that these medicines are what she can herself also purchase from a chemist counter. But this is what is not allowed in India, and because of this, what happens is that women often tend to avoid going to doctors, and then they resort to unhealthy practices of an abortion, and because of that, many women are being impacted, their healths are being impacted, many women are even losing their lives for that matter, is what has been talked about here. So that is one thing that is important. For example, a simple pregnancy check. A pregnancy test is what a woman can simply go to a chemist and buy a pregnancy test kit, and she can do that test on her own. So this is again a matter of privacy. For this, a woman will not have to go to a doctor. So this is again a part of the self-care intervention. Now, some interventions that are being sought here are with regards to some tests. For example, the HIV test. If a person is doubtful that he or she might be infected with HIV, then in that case, the person will have to go to a doctor, and the taboo and stigma associated with the disease is so high that the person might avoid going to a doctor. So what is being advocated is that for these kind of diseases, such kind of self-care interventions should be there. A person should be able to go to a chemist, buy the kit and do a test himself or herself. And then if the person is suffering from HIV, then the person can make a decision as to going to a doctor and getting treated. So these are some interventions which can reduce the losses of lives because of these kind of diseases. They can help do away with the stigma associated with some diseases. Also, it can uphold the privacy of an individual. So in that context, what has been discussed in the editorial is that these are good interventions, and the government should go ahead with this, especially in the case of HIV, for that matter, even in the case of TB, or for that matter, in the case of abortions. So these are some examples which have been given, and this could be a question. This is a rare topic that has been highlighted here, and these kind of questions are what you can expect in UPSC. Also, this could be a question in the ethics paper also. Such kind of ethical dilemma questions are what ethics paper is known for asking. So from that context also, you must have some degree of preparedness vis-a-vis this particular topic. Indeed important. So that is the relevance also. Coming to the next article. Imitation registry. Now the context here is with regards to the RIIN. Now basically the RIIN stands for the Register of Indigenous Inhabitants of Nagaland. Now just similar to the NRC of Assam, Nagaland is also going ahead, and it has said that it will also make a similar register, which will be the Register of Indigenous Inhabitants of Nagaland. So that is the entire context. Now coming to the issues. First and foremost, you should know about the National Register of Citizens in Assam. We have discussed a lot about it. All the criticism of the NRC which we have discussed has scope to be implemented and talked about in this particular article also. All those flaws are what can again be faced by the RIIN is what is being feared. Approximately 40 lakh people have been left out in the NRC. So this is a major burden. There are several human rights issues, human rights violations which are taking place vis-a-vis the NRC, and the fears are that this story is what could be replicated in Nagaland. So that is the first issue. The second issue, which is very, very important, this term in itself is important, is with regards to the complex demographies. Now all the northeastern states have a very, very complex demography. So if northeastern states are going to go ahead with such kind of indigenous registers, then it is going to be very, very difficult to prove who is an indigenous citizen and who is not. So that is what has been talked about. In the case of Nagaland, has often been talking about the idea of non-locals, non-tribal, non-Nagas. So that is the issue at hand. Another thing that has been discussed here is that this entire northeastern region is what is being called as a very, very volatile region, primarily because AFSPA is what is often in implementation in this particular region. So this is a volatile region, and such kind of tensions are what should not be found in this particular region, which could emerge in the aftermath of these kind of surveys or these kind of registers. So that is what is important. Another thing that has been discussed here is with regards to the diplomatic ramifications, especially with countries like Bangladesh. For instance, in the case of the NRC, Bangladesh has clearly stated that this is an internal matter of India, and any people who will be declared as non-citizens of India or Bangladeshi immigrants will not be welcome back in Bangladesh. This has diplomatic ripples, so that is what is important. Another thing that is important is that this could lead to an opening of a Pandora's box. Now, for instance, if a state like Maharashtra also starts saying that, because in Maharashtra there have been issues of son of the soil concept, so if Maharashtra also starts saying that they will also have such a register where they will make a note of all the people who are original Maharashtrians and not other people will not be allowed in the state. So you have to understand that India is a very, very diverse country. The cultures have now been mixed, and these kind of indigenous registers are what are not acceptable. So that is what has been talked about, that this is going to open a Pandora's box, in particular in Northeast and on a larger scale in the entire country. So that is what is being feared. Indeed, this topic is important. If a question on NRC also does come, talk about that, how this could lead to other states raising such demands, and give the example of Nagaland. That's how you have to use it, and that is going to be the importance. Coming to the next article, is there a case for free rights for women? This is one of the most important articles that I have discussed in a very, very long time. This is a very relevant article. I am expecting definitely some question in this regard is what you can seek in the ethics paper. Even if a question doesn't come, ethics paper has several philosophies that you have to prepare for. Several ethical issues are what you have to discuss. This can be an apt example for you all to use. In the issue of women also, this becomes important for General Studies paper 1. So that is where the relevance of this article lies. Now the context here is that it is being proposed in the state of Delhi, in the National Capital Region, that there should be free public transport for women, that is in the buses as well as in the metro. Women will not have to pay. So this is only a proposal, and because of that a lot of debate is what has been said. A number of people are favoring it, a number of people are opposing it. So what are the issues that have been involved are what become important. First and foremost, this editorial is highlighting and is just talking about some global examples. For example, countries like Singapore, all of these Norwegian countries like Luxembourg, Estonia, even in France, all these countries, they have such kind of policies where a section of their population is given free travel. Either it could be students, it could be the women, it could be the old age. So there are some pockets of the population who are being favored, and this is something that is not new. Even in India, there have been schemes of reservation for the vulnerable. So this is what is not something that is new and that has come out of the blue. So that is the first issue that has been discussed. The second issue is with regards to the relative disadvantage. Now, basically, this editorial is highlighting that some people in the country have some disadvantages which are primarily because of their unique social, economic or health reasons. There could be a health disadvantage for instance, for the disabled, or as we call the specially abled. And because of this, it might become important that a collective responsibility be taken by the state, and some functions and some facilities of the state services are what should be subsidized for them. So in that context, if the government is thinking of subsidizing travel for women, so that should be justified, because this kind of benefits, these kind of subsidies are what have been given for relatively disadvantaged, and the women here are being considered as disadvantaged. How and why is what we will be discussing. Another thing, that if this issue does come, if this question does come and you have to discuss it, I would rather suggest that this third point is what is mandatory for you to mention to get that extra mark, that extra 1 or 2 marks. Now basically this is about the UN Declaration of Human Rights. Here you should know that the Article 13 of this particular declaration gives a freedom of movement as a basic human right. This freedom of movement is also a fundamental right under the 6 freedoms in India. So this freedom of movement is a fundamental right. In that context, if this to increase the accessibility or this freedom to women, if some step is what is taken to ensure the implementation of this fundamental right, then indeed this is a positive step. That is how you have to bring it out. Now basically, if we discuss in the context of women, if we discuss the case of women, so we will come to know that there are several issues, there are several challenges that women face, and this is what has been wonderfully explained in this particular article, and that is the gist of this particular article. First and foremost, you have to understand that women compared to men, they already travel less. Largely, women in our society have a role to play of a homemaker, and as a result of which already they are disadvantaged. How many women as compared to men are already traveling? Also, what is important is that often distance of the workplace or distance of education is a major consideration for women, especially in a country like India. Often what happens is that as per this editorial, several studies are what have been quoted which have shown that women often opt for lesser less efficient jobs as well as less efficient education systems, just to consider the travel distance. So when travel distance is what is the major consideration for women, then isn't it beneficial that if the government is going to make the travel free, then it might encourage some women to step out of their home and seek better opportunities, which as of now the women are foregoing. That is what has been highlighted, that women often forego some opportunities primarily because of the travel distance. Also, what is important is that if in a middle class family, say for instance, now why I am discussing this in so much detail is because UPSC will reward you for such kind of in-depth analysis. If you, for instance, take off India's educated families also, the cars that they are owning are usually one car. So if that one car is what is there in the family, who is using this car? It is largely the male member using the car, not the female member. So even if the husband and wife are working, the wife has to take the public transport, which is clearly showing that in a family, if both are working, the public transport is being largely used by women. So that is one issue. Another issue that has been described here is with regards to the healthcare aspect of women. Often what is happening is that because to avoid travel, women are not availing healthcare facilities. So if this travel is what is made free, women can again avail healthcare facilities. So these kind of analysis are what have been offered in this particular editorial, and these are classic examples which you must analyze, you must bring out if a question does come as to why is there a case for free public transport for women. So that is one thing that is very, very important. Now another thing that has been discussed here is the cost of subsidy. Obviously this is going to be a burden on the exchequer, and how is this huge cost is going to be funded by the government is what has been talked about. Now basically the editorial is offering a solution. It is saying that the men who are traveling, it's not only the men, the people for that matter on a larger scale who are traveling by cars on road, they are having a very, very subsidized travel. They are not paying for the parking facilities that they are getting. They are not paying adequately for the roads that are being made available for them, for the pollution that they are causing. So the editorial is simply saying that if we simply start charging from these people who are traveling by cars on road, then through that money we can fund the women who this free transport to women, or for that matter free transport to the relatively disadvantaged sections of the society. So this is cross subsidization, this is taxing one and benefiting the other. These kind of theories and philosophies, if you remember, are a part of your ethics paper, and this is going to be relevant there. So that is what has been suggested here. Another issue which is a rather objection to this idea of the free public transport, and this is what is again important and you must highlight this. You know, in ethics paper, the key for scoring is that you should be able to bring out all the analysis. If an ethical question is what is asked from you, you should try and view it from all the multiple aspects. If you will successfully do that, you will definitely be rewarded in the ethics paper. And this is the negative aspect of this idea of free public transport, and that is why this is also a point that will be important. Here the women are criticizing that why is it that they are being looked down upon? Why is it that they are being considered as disadvantaged? Just based on gender, should one be looked down upon? Should one be considered disadvantaged because one is a woman and not a man? And should women be considered as any lesser citizens when they are working equal to men, when they are earning equal to men? Why should they be given this kind of doles is what is another argument that is coming from one particular lobby. So this is also what you must highlight. Indeed, this article is very, very relevant. This analysis on the case of women is what is very important. Try and highlight and bring out this kind of analysis if a question does come. This could be a case study also. This could also be a direct question, and if nothing does come, then use it as an example in the ethics paper. Definitely you have scope for using it. It has 100% utility. This article is a 100% utility article. There are few articles which I call 100% utility. This is one amongst them. So indeed very, very important. So that's about this particular article, and that's about our discussion for today. I thank you all for watching the video.